Welcome to episode 82 of the Band Hive Podcast.
You're listening to the Band Hive Podcast, the #1 online resource for DIY bands to learn about the music business and touring. If you want to turn your band into a lean, mean touring machine, you're in the right place. Now, let's get this show on the road.
It is time for another episode of the Band Hive Podcast. My name is James Cross, and unfortunately, I do not have Matt Hose with me here today, but I have Ty Christian, aka Fang von Rathenstein from Lords of the Trident.
Hey, that's me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a wonderful sunny day outside, and I'm down here in a dank cave, which is exactly where I love it.
I'm in the same boat, so I feel you, but I'm glad you're doing well, and it's good to have you here on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me. Absolutely.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, for those who don't know, Lords of the Trident was formed in 2008, and you guys are self-described as the most metal band on Earth.
Yeah, we're the most metal band on Earth. Anybody else who says otherwise, we invite openly to a steel cage, band-on-band match. 2 bands enter, 1 band leaves. Very Mad Max. I've been trying to get Manowar to get into a steel cage with us since the band's founding. You know what? They've never responded to my emails. I know why. Because they're scared. Because they know they'd lose. But yes, we are the most metal band on Earth. Absolutely.
That is awesome. Well, can you go back in time to 2008 and tell us a little bit about how Lords of the Trident came about, and even before that, what was your background in music?
Right, yeah. So if you want the very Dungeons & Dragons version, the very fleshed out version, the bio on the website is, I think it basically qualifies you for college English credit because it's so long, because we put so much into it. But, the real story is that I was living in the dorms with my best friend Aki, who's Asian metal in the band. And I was in a different band at the time, and we were just kind of messing around in the dorms. He's a monster guitar player, and I am like marginally okay at rhythm. But, I feel like I'm an okay singer. And so we were just kind of messing around and ended up recording some dumb demos, which we put up on like proto Facebook. Back in the day when you had to be in a college to be on Facebook. And we just had fun with it. And near the end of my super senior year, I did a victory lap, My band was breaking up, the band I was in college, and we ended up saying, well, heck, let's just do, let's do this recording project. Let's give it a shot, just do something fun over the summer. Let's do a couple shows and we'll really like amp it up. We'll have like costumes and fire and, all that sort of stuff. Well, by the 3rd show, we had like accidentally sold out a local venue here that had just opened. And it was smaller. It was like 120 capacity venue, but like none of us I certainly hadn't done that in my old band ever before. And people were like singing along. They had found the posts on Facebook and they knew the lyrics for some reason. That was the wildest thing. And so, after that, we were all sitting in the green room in the basement going like, so I guess we keep doing this then? And then, and Lords of the Trident has been going strong ever since 12, 13 years later. So that's kind of the beginnings. And, of course, just like any band, we've had, 5 or 6 drummers explode along the way. And we replaced everybody in the band except for me and Aki. So it's down to the original 2 members. And in terms of background in music, like previously, I've basically been in bands my whole life. I started, doing garage bands when I was 14, and my grandparents actually had a polka and pop band that they were in, and I always would see their post. I'd go over to the grandparents' house, see the posters on the wall as a little kid, and that's what made me go like, oh man, I want to do that too. That looks really wild, maybe not a polka band, but something cool like that. Something non-accordion based. We'll try that. And so I did piano lessons since I was 8. I did singing lessons since I was 10. Around 13, I ended up, my teacher kept pushing classical on me, and I'm like, no, I want to learn some Aerosmith or something like that, So I bought a guitar. The guitarist in my little high school garage band quit, and we were a 5-member act, and we were now a 4-member, but we needed another guitar. So I'm like, well, I'll learn the guitar. I did, and we've been going strong ever since. So
Nice. It's funny that you mentioned the drummers exploding because I saw that on your Wikipedia page. It's like, should I make a Spinal Tap reference?
oh God.
And then you did it for me. So that was perfect.
I told our current drummer that he is forbidden to ever leave the band. Like, he can't he can't die, he can't explode, he can't move away, because I am sick of taking band photos. Let me tell you, we've done like 5 or 6 like band promo shoots, and I'm an expert at it now. But like, man, I don't want to go through and edit all those graphics again. Like, no, what we got right now is good. Actually, I will have to do that because I recently, was it last year or the year before? I don't know. Time has no meaning anymore. But in the last couple of years, I ended up buying a half a cow online because they had a Black Friday sale for a half a cow. And so I bought a half a cow. And I taught myself how to do leatherworking, and I completely remade all of my leather armor that I wear on stage from scratch. It's a brand new set of armor, so now I got to take photos of at least me and put them in.
Yeah. The beauties of Photoshop.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned about redoing all the promo shots because a few episodes ago we had Chad Koal on the show, and he was in a band. He isn't anymore, but at the time he was the drummer and he became the singer. And then if you watch their music video from around that time, you never see the drummer's face. Like, there's a drummer, but he's always carefully hidden behind somebody else or like behind a guitar or something like that.
Oh, I love it. You frame the shot so the symbol is right over his face or something like that.
Exactly. So there's always that option if you need to go nuclear in the future.
That's fair.
Well, so one thing that struck me about you and Lords of the Trident is that you're extremely entrepreneurial. And you also have a great YouTube series called Words of Fang, where you go into all kinds of DIY stuff. And I highly recommend it to any Bandhive listener. A link to that will be in the show notes at bandhive.rocks/82. So go check that out because YouTube playlist URLs are a pain to read on a podcast with all the random characters.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
But the question here is, were you always so entrepreneurial, or is that something that came about later in life as you grew with the band?
I think what a lot of that stems from, and I think this is true for a lot of bands, is that we just don't have any money, And so I kept having these, large, grandiose ideas of doing, this music video or doing this type of merch or doing, X, Y, and Z. And we started out going the standard band route of like, okay, we'll get 60 shirts printed that just have our logo on them or something like that. And then you end up, a couple of weeks down the line wanting to make a new design and you're out of money, and nobody wants to pony up for the new design because, hey, we've still got the old design and they're not selling. And yeah, I told you putting just the logo on the shirt was a bad idea. That kind of standard band stuff. So I think from day one, since we didn't have the money to, operate like most bands, we had to come up with creative solutions and figure out things like how to print your own shirts and what other kinds of merch you can make yourself and, how to shoot a music video yourself or how to do your own green screen or how to do your own photo touch-ups or, stuff like that. So yeah, and I think from the experience of being in bands for so many years, like from being, from high school on, you have an opportunity to go through that cycle, the standard, merch and band management cycle once or twice. And you kind of see like what works and what doesn't. And, the honest truth is most of the standard band cycle just doesn't work. It doesn't scale down to a very small band that's trying to get out of the garage, so to speak. So, yeah, so I think that we've always kind of been this way. There's always been that tinge of like DIY centric sort of a thing. And it really got amped up when we ended up winning a Battle of the Bands contest a million years ago. And one of the people that was putting on the contest and one of the prizes was essentially you get a kind of a sit-down band business walkthrough with Martin Atkins, who was the drummer for Nine Inch Nails, and he's a real big proponent of DIY, kind of punk-focused DIY, band management, band asset creation, all that sort of stuff. And so this big, white-haired English guy would be like, Ty, listen, man, are you printing your own shirts? And I'm like, no, I don't know how to do that. Oh, my God, why aren't you printing your own shirts? It is so cheap. You can make 500 shirts tomorrow. What are you doing? Your band is terrible. You have to start being better at doing bands. And he'd just yell at me sort of like an American Idol judge for hours, and I'd be like, yeah, keep talking, your accent rules, yeah. It eventually all just sunk in that, I've got to learn how to print my own shirts, I do.
That's amazing. And so many Battle of the Bands are like, here's $500 cash, here's $1,000 cash. And guess what? That cash is gone within a week.
The cool thing about this one was it was put on by a local media college, Madison Media Institute. And the prize was basically, we'll record an EP, like fully record it, do the artwork, do the layout, do the press release for you. Because, I mean, one of the things that they wanted to do is they needed bands to kind of go through that process with the students so that the students could learn, this is how you do this is how you do that. So it was beneficial for them too. But then it was super beneficial for us because we got hooked up with a guy who had turned out to be our producer for the next 3 records. We got hooked up with Martin, and he kind of kicked us in the butt in terms of DIY approach. So yeah, it was really beneficial.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing prize package that blows most Battle of the Bands prizes out of the water.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, so going down the path further of entrepreneurial mindset, a few years ago, you guys made a power move by launching the Mad with Power Fest. That goes further down the path. And then you also released Mad Power Mead at the festival, so even more branding there. What made you decide, like, hey, we need to do our own festival?
It was 100% spite. It was built off of spite. There was a couple of bigger metal festivals in the U.S. that we either played or wanted to play. One of the bigger festivals that we played, I think it was 2013 maybe, was Legions of Metal Festival. And long story short, we were headlining one of the stages, the smaller stage, and it was the last day of the festival, and the venue ended up locking the doors one way. And it was 2 stages, so people would go back and forth all the time. So we're playing, and then 15 minutes later, the other band started, and so people were like, oh, I want to see which band we want to go see. So let's go check out a couple songs from these guys, check out a couple songs from these guys. Well, the venue had locked the door one way, so you could leave but couldn't get back in. So we started off with a packed room, and then there were 3 people left at the end, and we're like, oh my God, I think we suck. Do we suck? I think we suck. But then we found out what happened, and the festival's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. We didn't tell them to do that. We'll have you back on the main stage next year. And next year came and went, and oh, sorry, we can't do it. We'll do it next year. Oh, sorry, we can't do it. We'll do it next year. 7-8 years later, same thing every year. So that was upsetting. And then we also got an offer to play Prog Power, which is the biggest metal festival in the U.S. for our genre, that ended the same way. It's like, oh, I didn't get your email that you confirmed. He said that I have a read receipt from him that he opened my email, kind of a thing. Oh, I promise we'll do it next year. Oh, I promise we'll do it next year. Oh, if we're going to do it, I need you to pay me $15,000 directly to me. That sort of thing happened more than once. And it was one of those, Futurama Bender moments where it's like, whatever, I'll just make my own festival and it'll be cooler because it'll have video games and pinball. And you guys don't have video games and pinball. Like, screw you. So yeah, we started off Mad with Power. And the whole concept of it was to take a venue and fill it to the brim with free play arcade games, free play pinball, and do all sorts of like fun arcade related extras, and have a bunch of amazing power metal bands from all over the United States and sometimes all over the world come in and play. And we started it small and we grew it year to year. By Mad with Power 3, we'd sold out. And then Mad with Power 4 was supposed to be last year, but obviously everything didn't happen last year. This year, Mad with Power 4.1 is basically what's happening this year. It's that one that sold out in 80 hours. We opened up the tickets and we moved it to a really larger venue, like a 400, 500 capacity venue. And that just immediately sold out. So, I mean, it's been doing really, really well. I was lucky that I had a number of friends who also were running or had ran festivals. And I'd gone to a lot of festivals. So I was able to sort of take a lot of the best stuff that I saw happening at those festivals and also learn from a lot of the mistakes that other festivals had made in the past and try to make the whole process, as painless as possible for festgoers. If anybody out there wants to start a festival, my number one advice is to start very small and like slowly build over the years, and don't try to do a 5-day festival on your first year.
Yeah, don't do Firefest.
Yeah, don't do Firefest. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I mean, 80 hours is like 3 1/3 days. There's so many festivals that don't sell out at all, large or small. So the fact that you sold out a relatively large for a niche genre festival in 3 days, that's incredible.
Yeah, I'm super happy about it. And because we sold out so fast, we're also now offering live stream tickets. We've got a local company that's going to be filming the festival. We do this every year, and we just kind of put out kind of the post-fest, like, oh, check out these 3 clips from so-and-so. But this year, we're going to take that camera equipment, and we're also going to, alongside filming, we're also going to do a multi-camera, fully mixed live stream of the entire festival, not pre-recorded, 100% live. And both days, the ticket for both days is only $20. So a lot of people who bought tickets, a lot of people were really interested in the live stream, and I'm super excited to be offering that.
Well, hey, if you want to shout out the link for where to buy the live stream tickets.
Yeah, madwithpowerfest.com.
Awesome. Yeah, and that will also be in the show notes at bandhive.rocks/82. As with any links that are mentioned, they'll all be in there. So a nice central place to go. Click a bunch of links and find everything related to Mad with Power and Lords of the Trident and anything we mention. Like maybe pinball machines will be in there for all I know. Before we dive deep into the main topic, which is Patreon, which we haven't even gotten close to that yet, I learned all this, like these little side facts about Lords of the Trident by looking at your Wikipedia page, which is incredibly detailed, more detailed than the Wikipedia pages for many up-and-coming major label acts. So I was really impressed to see that as a DIY act, you guys have such a well-put-together Wikipedia page. Can you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, I was, from being sort of DIY management focused and all that sort of stuff, I've always been interested in trying to keep up with general tech in terms of bands and band management. And so I was looking through different availabilities for like Google optimization, for people trying to find our band, for trying to find Lords of the Trident. One of the things that I found while I was, watching videos and reading stuff is that, for bands that are loaded into, such and such database, and I forget exactly which one it is, but I think if you're like a verified artist on YouTube, for example, if you search for the artist's name, Google will pull up on the side, like a sidebar full of information about the band. You can try this right now. You can, type in Metallica or type in, anything, and you'll see this sidebar load up that'll have pictures, it'll have YouTube links, and importantly, it'll have the Wikipedia page, if there's one that matches. So I saw that, and I'm like, well, geez, I gotta make a Wikipedia page about Lords of the Trident so that we can kind of flesh this out. So I went in and made a page, and we had enough external references, reviews, and stuff like that I could make a page and have it verified. And then from there, fans have gone in and modified it and added little facts and things like that. So it's great. It's a wonderful kind of resource that's been growing on its own, and doesn't need a whole lot of feeding and watering. I'll give it a little edit time and again, just in case that somebody changes my name to like Fang Von Butts or something like that. So, but so it's been a really great resource for people to just kind of see the history of the band. And pull some factoids.
Yeah, that's great. And, I just searched for Lords of the Trident right now to double check that. And one other thing I noticed is that at the bottom it has the people also searched for section. So when you have that bar, I assume that is also when other people search for something related to Lords of the Trident. That's when Lords of the Trident will come up as well, because you have that sidebar. Yeah.
It's all sorts of really great info that's good to know and good to start, thinking about when you're putting together things like promotion campaigns and stuff like that. It's like, oh, people are always searching for Britney Slays. Got to get that in there.
Yeah, so I take it if anybody is in a band and they have some links that they can use as citations in a Wikipedia article, it sounds like you would absolutely recommend it. Is that right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's not hard to do. I think a lot of people have hangups about things like making their own Wikipedia page. It's like, oh, well, the fans should really do that if we're big enough, man. But in reality, the Wikipedia page is a lot more of a useful tool as you're growing to have. So I don't think anybody should have hangups about like stuff like making their own Wikipedia pages or wearing their own shirts or anything like that. So especially if you make, excellent shirt materials. That's the problem. I wear so many Lords of the Trident shirts all the time, and it's because like we spend a lot of time hand selecting the fabric that we're printing these shirts on. Like I specifically say, okay, I want Bella Canvas, 5001C, I want the ring spun cotton, and then you end up with like these super soft shirts. And so then I end up wearing Lords of the Trident shirts all the time because all my other shirts are
Gildan.
terrible. They're like sandpaper. So it's like, so everybody's like, oh, he's just a shill for his own band. It's like, dude, I just like feel this shirt. I can't wear other shirts now. Come on.
Yeah. Dude, it's like, it really is night and day. And I know you mentioned this in one of your Words of Fang videos about the shirt quality, but it's like wearing a nice, good quality, thin, comfortable shirt that breathes versus a Gildan shirt. It's like, no way, never going back.
I feel like such a, whenever I go up to merch tables now, I feel like such a prude. I'll walk up and I'll reach down and I'll like feel the shirt with my fingers and I'll be like, this must be Gildan. I see, and I'll walk away.
It's like you're not judging them openly, but you're judging them.
I am, yeah. A lot of our fans too have been like, you guys have ruined band shirts for me. It basically said like, yeah, I mean, all I wear is Lords of the Trident shirts now because it's tough for me to wear other things. I'm like, ha, perfect. The system works.
That's brand dedication right there.
Exactly.
Man, that's something that so many artists can do, and it's not that much more expensive to get good quality shirts.
Especially if you're printing them yourself. It's like 50 to 75 cents more per shirt if you do it yourself. And yeah, it's 100% worth it.
Yeah. I will absolutely link to both of your DIY shirt printing videos in the description because that's like so important. And I watched those, and I think I told you when we were chatting on Facebook, I was like, now I want to make shirts, and I'm not even in a band. Like, I just want to make shirts because it looks so cool.
It's cool, and it's super simple, and it's really cheap to get started. It blew my mind how easy it was to do this. Once I printed a couple shirts, and like I figured out the process, I'm like, oh my God, I should have been doing this like from day one. This is so simple. It's dead simple. And yeah, you turn around, you print a shirt for like all of maybe $3, and then you can turn around and sell it for 15, rather than like, I don't know, buying 60 shirts and having them sit languish in your basement because it turns out nobody liked the teddy bear unicorn design that you came up with. Actually, the teddy bear unicorn is our number one biggest seller. It's been sold out for a long time, so.
That's a good thing to know.
Yeah, you're like, that was too specific to be any.
Well, man, I feel like we've already learned so much. Now it's time to get to the main topic for this episode, now that we've learned about your history and some of the other stuff you're involved in, like Mad With Power Fest. And you pitched the idea of a Patreon episode. And in my mind, I was like, oh, perfect timing. Because back on episode 77, so 5 weeks ago, we had Brian from I Fight Dragons. If anyone hasn't heard that episode yet, I encourage you to, after you finish this episode, go back and listen to it. It's lessons learned from a fan-supported DIY band. And we talked extensively about how I Fight Dragons uses Patreon to monetize their albums. And they don't do what most people do, just as a quick crash course in what they do. They charge people every time they release an album. So it's not monthly, it's not yearly. It's just, hey, here's our new album. Here are the perks for this album. So it's once per cycle. And we talked extensively about how and why they do that. But what we didn't talk about is how does a band get started on Patreon, which is a massive question. For them, they kind of use it as an evergreen Kickstarter. They have an established audience. Most people aren't in that situation where they can be like, hey, we're going to get $40,000 on Patreon every time we release an album. So diving into it, how did you guys get started on Patreon, and what are some of the fundamental things you've learned about growing your Patreon audience?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm in tech. I've always been interested in technological ways to do stuff with your band and band management and all that sort of stuff. And so when Kickstarter first came out, back in the day, when Kickstarter came out, I watched what people were doing with it, and I was like, oh, we could probably use this for our next album. But I was very, very pessimistic. And I think a lot of bands are in this mindset. Who would give us money? Like, this is not going to work. People don't want to like throw money at some band that they've never heard of, that kind of mindset. And so when I started our first Kickstarter, I set the goal level absurdly low. I set it at $700. And thinking, right, that it was going to be like tooth and nail up to the last day to try to get that last $20, and we might have to throw in a couple $100 of our own money and that kind of stuff to make it work. We met the goal in 24 hours, and it was like, guess crowdfunding does work. Real quick, funny side story to that. One of the things, when I was pitching this to the rest of the guys in the band, they were also as pessimistic as I was. Like, I don't know, who wants to give us money? We're not that big, and so I watched and listened to a bunch of stuff on how to run a successful Kickstarter. A lot of it from Martin Atkins. And he's like, the one thing that you should do is add in a really funny stretch goal that that you're not going to reach. Like if we make $50,000, we'll all travel to India and take a picture in front of the Taj Mahal, kind of like weirdness, So one of the things that I did was, in my pessimistic mind, this was never going to happen. I said, okay, if we triple our initial goal, if we get $2,100, then we're going to do a Lords of the Trident sexy calendar. We're going to do the Men of Lords of the Trident sexy calendar. And we ended up finishing the campaign with $2,300. So we ended up having to make a sexy calendar. And to which Aki has told me that we're never doing that ever again. I'm not allowed to do that, to pitch that ever again. But, the longest and short of it is that a lot of bands, I think, are when they think about this, when they think about asking people for money, they're very pessimistic because, internally, you can't really see the forest from the trees. You just think of yourself as like just some random guy in their basement writing songs that maybe people kind of sort of like. But the reality of it is if you've been a band, even a small short of time, you very likely have super fans out there. And even if you don't have super fans, you have friends out there who are willing to support you just because of who you are, just because of the friendship, and they want to see you succeed. So the first hurdle, I think, for most bands in terms of getting in that Patreon mindset is getting over that fear of, we're too small for this, we're not going to make enough money, nobody's going to look at it, kind of a thing. I talk on Patreon at some music conferences, and what I say is, raise your hand if you could use an extra $1,000 in your band fund every month, and all the hands go up. And it's like, okay, keep your hands raised if you could use an extra $100, just not 1,000, but 100, and all the hands stay up. And I'm like, raise your hand if you can use an extra $5 in your band fund every month, and all the hands stay up. And it's like, yeah, we're small bands, we're small businesses. We could use anything, even if it's an extra $1 a month. We can use that for putting, gas in the tank or buying pizzas or something like that. And so getting out of that mindset of like, such and such is making $10,000 a month, I'm never going to be there, so I shouldn't start a Patreon. I encourage people, bands of all sizes, of all ages, in terms of how long they've been around, to actually, start up your Patreon and let it grow with you. That's kind of like the first kind of step of getting into that Patreon mindset. So and lessons learned, I mean, there's from starting out, there's a ton. Much like Kickstarter, when I started Patreon, I started it very pessimistically, thinking, I don't think we're going to get a whole lot of money. By the way, the reason that we ended up starting on Patreon is because I saw one of my favorite online comedy groups, Mega 64, ended up starting up their own Patreon. And their pitch was, hey, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We're not going to make Mega 64 like an exclusive thing. We're going to still put out videos all the time, and they're all going to be public. But if you like what we do and you want to see us like kind of reach that next level, and you want to see us be able to afford, bigger and better things, toss us $1 a month or $10 a month or whatever. And you can start or stop at any time. And really, we're just going to use this money to make Mega 64 better. And if you want to see that, then toss us a couple bucks. And so I took that perspective. I really liked that perspective. So I took that perspective and applied it to Lords of the Trident, where I said, like, look, we're going to keep making albums. We're going to keep playing shows. But if you want to see us do more, jump on the Patreon and we'll offer some, exclusive stuff that's Patreon only. And I did start very low. I started like with $1, $3, $5, and $10 were our levels. And it went wild. We grew like exponentially over the course of, I don't know, couple years, 3 years. And we got to the point where our income and our expenditures for creating stuff for the Patreon was sort of leveling out. So we ended up having to retool the Patreon, get rid of some prizes, add some additional prizes. and most importantly, change the prize levels in terms of what we offered. So we upped all the dollar amounts. And again, pessimistic me was like, oh my God, we're going to lose so many people on the Patreon, and they're going to think, oh, Lords of the Trident's just money grubbing and whatever. But we were very transparent about it. We told everybody, like, look, costs are going up, shipping's going up, the cost of our, wonderful ring-spun, gorgeous t-shirts is going up. And so we're going to have to charge a little bit more to just kind of keep with that. And to my surprise, absolute shock, 100% of our patrons moved over to the new tiers. There was zero complaining. And actually, we got a number of messages from people that were like, oh, I'm so glad you did this. We always feel so bad because we're getting so much more than like we're paying in. So like, I'm super happy that you've upped the pledge amounts, so we can give you more money, which is like, okay, I guess people like us. All right. But yeah, I mean, there's so many tidbits. The thing that I would say for bands that are first looking at Patreon, right? A, get out of that mindset of like, we can't ask people for money, we're not big enough. B, recognize that Patreon is a thing that will grow with you. It's not a Kickstarter. It doesn't end after 30 days. It just exists. And you can grow and change it as your band grows and changes. You can add things, delete things. As long as you're transparent with your fans, you can change the Patreon as much as you want. And then the third thing that people run into is like, well, I just don't know what we'd offer. We just don't have, they look at a Patreon like ours where we're throwing, all sorts of prizes at people. And they're like, we can't do that. There's no way, we don't have the energy or the time or the, whatever to do that. And a lot of bands are very sort of narrow-minded in this process of like, what can we offer? We can only offer music or t-shirts or whatever. And the reality of it is a bunch of bands, even small bands, right, have so much that they can offer potential Patreon backers. I tell people that generally there are 3 buckets that you want to look into. Merch, right? Physical or digital product. The second bucket is access. So things like hanging out, things like Discord access. Maybe, if you're really good at your instrument, like lessons over Skype or shout outs or video check-ins or stuff like that. And then the third bucket is behind the scenes content, right? So for your higher tier Patreon backers, you can give them access to demos or show them around the green room in Norway when you're playing or whatever, like take a video and post it there. And those super fans, right, that you've cultivated that are at that high tier feel like they're really part of the team and they have the insider scoop. I'm sure we would all have loved to be like, hey man, did you check out the new album from so-and-so? Like it's a masterpiece. And then to turn around and say like, yeah, dude, I heard that 3 months before it was released. I've heard all the demos. I actually suggested a lyric change on this song on the third verse, which they took and they added into the song. That was me. Like if you look at the booklet, my name is like listed on the first page. So there's so much that people can offer that goes well beyond physical product and music. And I think too, people sort of put themselves into these buckets of like, we're too small for this. Nobody's going to care. And it's that same thing of like, you have at least one super fan of your band right now, even if it's just your mom. Somebody loves your band out there enough to give you $5 a month or $10 a month. Or somebody just loves you enough to give you $5 a month or $10 a month. Once you start cultivating those super fans, how cool would it be to like dive into the Patreon and rewind the clock like 3 years? Let's say you found, for example, wouldn't it be amazing if like Iron Maiden, you got in on the ground floor of Iron Maiden, back before they hit it big, and you can look back, 3 years before they're releasing, such and such an album and listen to the early demos and hear the band talk about how they're not sure if it's going to be good or if anybody's going to like it. I think that's the draw of this for a lot of people is that, they have a local band that they support or a regional band or even a bigger band, like We Fight Dragons, that when they join the Patreon, they sort of start to feel like part of the team. They have that insider scoop. They have that insider knowledge. Maybe they've got the lead singer's phone number and can call him up. Like what would you give to be on first name basis with Bruce Dickinson, be able to call him up and be like, yo, Brucey, what's up? And he's like, I'm just playing football in the backyard. oh, it's a beautiful day over here in England. It's cloudy and rainy. Beautiful. I mean, like, that would be amazing, right?
I would ask for flying lessons.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. I'll take you up next time I'm going. So yeah, there's so much more that you can offer. You do have super fans, and even if you don't right now, you eventually will. You know, if you're serious about growing your band, eventually you're going to get some crazy guy out there who's going to get a tattoo of your band, and then you've got a super fan, and you know that guy's going to give you $15 a month, like clearly. So, so yeah, I think there's a lot of fear involved with bands starting up Patreon, or uncertainty, maybe is a better way to say it. And the best thing to do is, I mean, just dive in, get your feet wet. If you're making $5 a month, that's $5 extra a month that you've got. If you're making $0 a month, that's okay too. It doesn't cost anything to be on Patreon. So, you know, try, experiment, see what works, see what doesn't. Look at the data, and then, you know, change and adjust. If you're making no money, you know, try something new. You can change your Patreon at any time. So yeah, that's kind of a broad question to get into, I think.
No, I think that's great though. And before I go further, I just want to say congratulations on hitting 300 patrons.
Oh, thank you.
Because when I did the research, it was at 297. I was like, I should double check this. It's been like a week, and you're at 300 right now. So congrats for that.
It will fluctuate too, because it's, you know, at the beginning of every month, the people get charged because we're doing a monthly thing. And so, you know, you'll always get 10 or 20 people whose credit card got declined, and they go, oh yeah, sorry, I got to put in my new card, kind of a thing. So it's a big sine wave of like, up 300, up we're under again, up 300, up we're under again. But yeah, no, it's been growing up until 2020, and I mean even through 2020, it's been growing quite strong for us year to year. You know, looking back at the data, and I was really surprised when lockdown happened, and you know people were losing their jobs and things were very uncertain. I was expecting to take a really big hit in terms of Patreon backers, and we barely lost anybody. That was super surprising.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that probably goes to show how much music means to people. It's just such a universal thing. You know, not everyone connects with the same music, but they connect with some music on some level. And that's like, for a lot of people, that's therapy. It's like, this is my favorite band. When I'm having a tough day, I go listen to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There are definitely some artists out there that, you know, I've gotten so much out of their music that even if I was paying them $15 a month for, you know, 20 years, I wouldn't feel like I had given enough, because that sort of art and music can be really impactful and life-changing for a lot of people. And that's why you bands out there making music, get on Patreon. Come on.
By the way, how long has Lords of the Trident been on Patreon? When did you guys launch that?
I think it's been, I could be wrong on this, I think it's been like 4 years, maybe 4 or 5.
Okay. So pretty early adopters of the platform.
Yeah, we were on Patreon pretty early, before a lot of bands were actually doing stuff on Patreon, when it was a lot more like YouTubers and things like that. Like I said, I mean, I really just saw what Mega 64 was doing, where they were just like, yo, if you want to give us money, that's cool. If you don't, that's cool too. Like, you don't have to. I saw that and I love that approach, and I'm like, okay. So I kind of modified it towards our band, and yeah, and it's worked really well. And then now there's a ton of bands on Patreon, and I love the fact that there are so many musical acts on Patreon, that they're sort of diversifying and becoming more than just a platform for YouTubers or Twitch streamers or stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, the irony there is that it was founded by a musician, and musicians weren't the first people to pick up on it.
Yeah. I mean, it is crazy. You know, I mean, when you think of like Pomplamoose, and you'd think that would be the first thing that he would cater towards. He'd be like, musicians, get on this platform. And then YouTubers were like, ooh.
Yeah. I think part of that might be because Jack Conte and Pomplamoose were YouTubers. Like, they were musicians, but they were YouTubers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and they were so strong on that platform.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned in your first response here all the different prizes and merch items and all that kind of stuff that people can get for the different tiers of being a patron. Is there any one prize or item that sticks out as the most popular among your patrons? Yeah,
easily the most popular stuff is, in terms of physical product, is the shirts. This very much stemmed from, it was a stepping stone from printing your own shirts. The biggest issue when you don't print your own shirts for small bands is that there are quantity limits that you have to hit. You have to do at least 60 shirts of such and such a design. to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, it's too expensive. When you print your own shirts, you can make 2 or 12 or 20 or 200, and it's the same cost, whether you do 2 or 10 or whatever. So because we were already doing that so much, because we were making our shirts, and we could make 2 or 20 or 10 or whatever, we said when we were starting up, we'll do exclusive Patreon designs. We'll do 3 t-shirts a year, one of which we're going to sell at the merch booth, but 2 of which are going to be Patreon-only designs. So the cool thing that sort of came about from that was that if you are wearing one of these Patreon shirts, the band knows that you're a Patreon backer, so I will laser focus. If we're on tour and I'm somewhere out in California that I've never been before, and some dude walks in with a Patreon shirt, I will laser focus in on this guy, and I'm like, I'm going to buy you a beer. Let's talk. And then that guy is going to be like, oh, they recognized me. They know who I am. And it's going to be like an amazing experience for them. And B, if you see another person with a Patreon exclusive shirt, instantly you have something in common to talk about. Boom, there's your next best friend at the concert. You can go and get a beer together and talk about Lords of the Trident. So the exclusive shirts have been great. It's also been it's been a great opportunity to do dumb inside jokes that only super fans would really get on a shirt. Sometimes you come up with these t-shirt design ideas and you're like, this is so good, but only our real top tier fans would understand. I couldn't sell this at a show where people are seeing us for the first time. They'd be like, why does that shirt just say Basement Potatoes on it? I'm not going to buy that. But, a fan would be like, oh, from podcast 163, the Basement Potatoes one. And I'm like, so that kind of stuff, it enables us to do these dumb shirts that we love and our super high tier fans would love, but that, we normally would never even think about printing. So yeah, the shirts have been really, really fantastic. I think another thing that people really enjoy that is not a physical product is behind the scenes demos, right? So we are currently working on our 10th album, and we are pretty much almost done recording it. We're going to finish it up by the end of June. And everybody who's on the top 2 tiers of our Patreon has already heard completely mixed, fully fleshed out demos of the entire album. And I mean, these are early demos. We've re-recorded and done stuff since then. It's going to sound way better when it's all done. But essentially, these people have already heard the tracks that are coming out, and they get to kind of have that badge of honor of oh, man, you changed this from the demo version so much, and they'll have things to talk about with other fans, oh, did you hear this and this? And this is also our first concept album that we're ever doing, so people are already guessing at the storyline, trying to put the album in order. We haven't told them what the order is. It's been really, really popular. People love getting that behind-the-scenes early access, demo and that kind of stuff, beta videos and things like that. Behind the scenes has been really, really popular.
Yeah. So that right there, that's something any band can do. To go back to what you were saying a few minutes ago about, even bands who think they don't have content, they have content. They can put that out.
Oh, yeah. Even if the behind the scenes for you is just you take a picture of the band in the green room before you're about to go on stage and you post that. You're like, yo, this is what the green room looks like. Anybody could take out their phone and take a little snippet of hey, we're here in the Riverside Bar in Omaha, Nebraska. I just want to check out these cheese curds, man. They have the craziest looking. And then, oh, here's Phil. Phil just changed his bass strings for the first time in 3 years. Well, how does it feel, Phil? Oh, it feels great. All right, cool, man. And then you post that up on Patreon, and people love that sort of stuff. They're like, oh, I've been there. Yeah, the cheese curds are great.
Yeah, anything that they can relate to. Ultimately, that's what people want, is they want to have a connection with their favorite artists, and if that's a connection that they can relate to on a personal level, even better.
Yeah, there's a band too. I mean, kind of going back into the second bucket of access. Another thing that's really easy for any band to do, and there's a band that's doing this right now and absolutely killing it. Band out of Madison here called Casket Robbery that I helped them set up their Patreon. They've been really good about doing monthly open hangs. So they'll go on Discord and they'll have an area that's only, if you can unlock if you're on the Patreon. And then last night they did a virtual pizza party. So they're like, yo, all of our fans from, across the globe, order pizza, get it delivered. We'll stream some cartoons or movies or whatever, and we'll just all hang and chat and have a virtual pizza party together. So they do stuff like that. They do like coffee hangouts in the morning where they'll just, and sometimes people show up and sometimes they don't, but you can just kind of drop in if you're a fan of this band and just enjoy your coffee and just chat about anything, the weather, the last album. They do that so well, and that takes zero effort. Like any band could do that. Any band.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally just setting up a Zoom call and a way to stream it, and you're good to go.
It's super easy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. I have one more question, which you already kind of mentioned, that you had to up your prices on Patreon. But have there been any other struggles with Patreon? And if there were, how did you overcome them?
So the big struggles on Patreon, I think for a lot of creators, there's a small struggle and it's more an administrative struggle. And it's what I was talking about earlier of people's credit cards getting denied, and then you feel weird about like poking them over email, like, hey, your credit card was denied. Hey, could you please fix that? One of the things that Patreon doesn't allow you to do currently is to remove people from your Patreon without like blocking them and sending them a nasty email. Like you've been blocked from the and so we have people who have had their credit cards declined for like 2 years, who are just sitting there in limbo, not receiving anything. And I'd love to go in and be able to just take them out, because you got to sort for them in the Excel spreadsheet when you do prizes. But anyway, that's more of an administrative gripe. I think the real big problem that most people who run Patreons deal with, and we definitely deal with too, is that it is a positive feedback loop of guilt money. And this is a good thing. This is exactly how we've grown the Patreon, but this can cause problems too. So, you start up your Patreon, and then, a month later, boom, you're making $20 a month. So at the end of the month, that money comes in, and then immediately you go, oh crap, what have I done for them lately? Oh, I got to do something. And then you go out and you create something. You make a post, you make a music video, maybe you put something together to offer these people that have given you money. And, oftentimes those things will be public, like, oh, you promise them that you'll make another YouTube video once a month at a certain level. And then people see that YouTube video and they're like, oh, I got to get on this Patreon. So then now you're making $50 a month. And then that happens. You're like, oh no, I make even more money now. I got to make more stuff. Oh crap. And then you make more stuff. And then the next month you're making $100, and then you're making $200. And it's this feedback loop of like, I got to make more because I'm getting in this money. And you get this, and it gets to absurd amounts where you're making $2,000, $3,000 a month. And you're like, oh no, like I really need to be making more stuff. I think creators can get into that mindset because it's very easy to get into that positive feedback loop of guilt money, right? Where you're like, I need to be making more stuff constantly all the time. And there are, a lot of people have talked about Patreon burnout. And I think this isn't exclusive to Patreon. YouTubers talk about YouTube burnout, where they get big and they get bigger and bigger. And then they feel like they've got to keep creating, or maybe even keep creating more in order to keep their people happy and to not lose people. So that's something that's very easy to get into. At first you were just offering one t-shirt a year and like a shout out. And now you've got podcast and a weekly Twitch stream, and you're doing, 3 concerts a month, and you're making 50 t-shirts a year, and it ends up having that sort of an effect. One of the ways that we combat that is once a year, we do like a Patreon-wide survey where we ask a bunch of pointed questions about, do you feel like we're doing a good enough job? Do you feel like your pledge is worth the money that you're spending? And every year we ask them the question, okay, if we stopped doing everything on Patreon, if we no more shirts, no more exclusive posts, no more behind the scenes, would you pledge at the level you're pledging? Would you pledge more, or would you pledge less? And every year that we've done this 3 years in a row, every single year, around 70 to 75% of people say they would pledge the same amount, even if we didn't give them a thing on Patreon. Now, do I believe that? Mildly. I mildly believe that. But I think, it's easy for creators to see this giant lump sum of money coming in and freak out. If you turn the perspective around, some guy out there is giving you $5 a month, and maybe really only expects one check-in or one post a month, or maybe he doesn't expect anything. Maybe they're just giving you the money to help support your art, and because they feel like we said earlier, like they've gotten so much more out of your art than $5 a month. So that's one of the big problems that people can get into. One of the solutions to get out of it, is to recognize that even if you're making 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 grand a month on Patreon, you don't always need to up your game to match that amount. And also, I think one thing that can help out tremendously is jump on Patreon and be a patron of somebody else, especially somebody that you really admire. Like, jump on and, like, for me, it was being a patron of Mega64. I did not care if they made a post or not. I had absolutely no care in the world. Like, I've gotten so much out of so many hours of joy out of their content that, to me, like $10 a month, that's absolutely nothing for what I've gotten in return. So, you can get out of that mindset easier if you are on both sides of the coin in terms of Patreon.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I know that's something that, like you say, everyone struggles with. So if people are starting a Patreon, it's going to start right away. As soon as they get that first patron, they're going to say, well, what do I do for content now? It starts right there. So, man, this has been amazing. And I think it's been so knowledge-packed and just like knowledge bombs everywhere. So thank you so much for joining us, Ty. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say, to any bands out there that want to go a little bit more in depth on how to set up a Patreon, A, I've got a whole walkthrough video on the Words of Fang series you can check out. But B, one of the things that I just openly offer is, like, just hit me up. Email me, lordsofthetrident@gmail.com, if you want to sit down over Skype or Zoom or whatever, and we can brainstorm for an hour, and I can, bring you through the whole Patreon, building a Patreon from start to finish, and help you set up your Patreon. I'm happy to do that for free. So just hit me up, lordsofthetrident@gmail.com. I think the more people that are leveraging this platform, the better off everybody's going to be. It's that whole rising tide raises all ships. So feel free to hit me up if anybody out there is listening is like, I want to know more, or I don't know where to start exactly.
Yeah, well, man, that is super generous of you. Thank you for putting that offer out there. I know that there's probably a lot of artists who are thinking about launching a Patreon and don't know where to start, so I hope they hit you up with that. Aside from that, where can people learn more about you and Lords of the Trident and Mad with Powerfest? You already said is madwithpowerfest.com, but put all your links out there. Where should people go?
You got it. I'm going to make it easy for everybody. The number one best place to go is just lordsofthetrident.com. Make sure you use your most metal browser to go there, which is probably Chrome, because there aren't any other browsers that are named after a metal. That's the only one that I'm aware of. If you try to use, like, if you try to use Microsoft Edge, it'll probably catch your computer on fire. Make sure you put on your strongest suit of armor, that you're wearing protection, that you've got your most metal browser. Go to lordsofthetrident.com. You can also go to, youtube.com/lordsofthetrident. We put out a lot of content. Over quarantine, we put out a video every week, and we're going to try to keep up, probably not that, but as a lot of video content as much as we can possibly do. Yeah, so youtube.com/lordsofthetrident. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/lordsofthetrident. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, the whole shebang. Basically, if you type Lords of the Trident into Google, the first 50 pages are us, and then it starts to get really weird. So just, that's what I'd recommend. But lordsofthetrident.com is your one-stop shop for all of us. And of course, if you like what you see, if you go to youtube.com/lordsofthetrident and you're like, man, this handsome band full of wonderful people, I need to help support this band, go to patreon.com/lordsofthetrident and just pledge $1, and you get so much for just $1.
All right. Well, amazing. Again, Ty, thank you so much for joining us. Super appreciated. I'm looking forward to this episode dropping because I think it's going to be super useful to a ton of people. So really appreciate it, and I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.
That does it for this episode of the Band Hive podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening. And of course, big thanks to Ty Christian, aka Fang von Rathenstein from Lords of the Trident, for hanging out and sharing his knowledge and advice with all of us today. Much appreciated. And man, so many great things to learn. Not only did they not take no for an answer with a festival that was just kind of saying, yeah, next year. And then they went and launched their own festival. Like, that's huge. That is the entrepreneurial spirit that artists need to really make a go of a career in music. You know, if somebody tells you no, okay, whatever. Get back up and try again. And if everyone tells you no, make it happen on your own. That is incredible. And of course, when it comes to Patreon, Ty has so much knowledge to share. I hope that if you are considering starting a Patreon, which everyone should consider, do reach out to Ty and take him up on his offer of helping you go through some strategies for Patreon, because that is incredibly generous. I would think that he would charge $60, $100, $200 or some amount of money for that, and he's giving it away for free. So please go hit him up for that. That's huge. If you missed the contact info in the episode, it will be on our show notes page at bandhive.rocks/82. Aside from that, if you have any questions, please feel free to use our Bandhive community on Facebook as a resource. Ask whatever music industry related questions you have there, and you will get an answer from myself or somebody else in the community, and most likely multiple people who are members of the group. If you're not already there, just head on over to Facebook and search for Bandhive. Make sure you find the group, not just the Facebook page, and join us. We are happy to welcome you with arms wide open. I'm making a Creed reference because I didn't make a band pun the whole time, but there it is, with arms wide open. Or if you want to do it the easy way, just go to bandhive.rocks/group, and that will automatically redirect you to our Facebook community. That's all for this week. We will be back next week with another brand new episode, Tuesday at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Until then, I hope you all have an awesome week. Stay safe, and of course, as always, keep rocking.